Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes for a couple of people to tune in before we get started. I hope that everyone is safe out there. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe from this virus. My prayers are with everyone for safety and for prosperity. I hope that you all are doing well under the circumstances. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for a couple of people to tune in, and then I want to get started with this video. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Again, peace and blessings, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. So Diddy made the news recently, and I'll post this article from Black Enterprise in the description box after this video uploads, and I'll post more information as well in the description box so that people could check this out and share their thoughts about it. But I wanted to hear from you all. Like, what do you think about what Diddy had to say about voting for Joe Biden? And what I'm going to do is read from this article, and then I want to hear from you all, and then I'll provide my thoughts about the situation. So Diddy posted on Twitter, he said, the black vote will not be free this year. And then he was on a live stream with model Naomi Campbell, and he made some additional remarks about voting. And this has caused a lot of controversy. Some people were upset. I even saw part of Roland Martin's show where he had some people talking about this issue as well. But this is what Diddy said. He said the black vote is not going to be for free. We're going to have to see some promises. We're going to have to understand what kind of deal we're getting out of. What are we getting in return for our vote? Nothing has changed in America for Black America. And in order for us to vote for Biden, we can't be taken granted like we always are because we're supposed to be Democrats or because people are afraid of Trump. It's whoever is going to take care of our community. Whoever wants to make a deal, it's business at this point. We can't trust politicians, so we want to know very clearly, just like Trump made it clear that he want to build a wall, Biden needs to make it clear that he's going to change the lives and quality of life of Black and brown people. That's what Diddy had to say. And he said, I will hold the vote hostage if I have to. So that's Diddy's comments, and I want to hear from you all. Like, I want to hear what you all think about what Diddy had to say about the vote. So I just want to check to see if everyone can hear and see me okay. If you can just throw up a 7 in the comments, I would appreciate it. I encourage everyone to like this video, to share this video with your networks, and also to hit your notification bell so that you'll know right away when I post new content on here. All right, so let me go into my commentary about this particular point. As people comment, I'll just, mention your comments and respond to your comments. But this has caused a lot of controversy. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for throwing up the 7. I'm glad that everything's, the sound is coming through clearly and the image is coming through clearly as well. So, these comments that Diddy made has caused controversy. People have considered those comments to be irresponsible and reckless and all that kind of stuff. And they've said, well, we need to be worried about getting Trump out of here. The last thing we need to do is be making comments like this. And I want to just share my thoughts about this very briefly. I agree to an extent that this situation that we're in is critical, that there's a lot at stake in this election. And we know that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about Black people. We know it by the appointments that he's made to the federal bench. We know it through the things that he has said about the black community and the things that he has done. He's made it abundantly clear that he supports these right-wing white supremacists. He doesn't give a damn about black people. His agenda is hostile to black people. We know about his position when it comes to policing issues. As far as he's concerned, his administration views police brutality and things of that nature as some local issue. We know that his administration doesn't support voting rights. His administration supported some sham voter fraud commission that was designed to undermine the black vote and Latino vote as well. We know that it was designed to suppress black voters and other so-called minority voters. We know about his hostility to the black community. We know about the statements that he made about black protesters during his rallies, statements that he's made encouraging his supporters to engage in violence against black protesters. We know about the statements that he made about black athletes who protest at the NFL games, referring to them as sons of bitches. We know about this stuff. We know that this man is openly hostile to the interests of black people. So there is a lot at stake in this election. A whole lot. When we're looking at the federal bench, not only the Supreme Court, but you have the Court of Appeals and you have the district courts around the country. We know that a lot is at stake. When we look at the situation today, this poor and reckless response to the coronavirus, a situation that is a pandemic, a situation that is a crisis. This man has failed in leadership in so many ways, and this coronavirus crisis highlights his failure in leadership. There's a lot at stake, and we know that this virus is disproportionately impacting black communities, but this man has not effectively dealt with that situation. And I'm going to explain how he hasn't dealt with the situation. Number one, he received all these intelligence reports about the threat that this virus poses to American people. Before it even reached the United States, before it became a pandemic here in the United States, this man was on notice about the situation, but he continued to downplay it. Comparing it to just the flu, basically saying it'll be gone. It's not a big problem. Only a few people have it and all that kind of stuff, downplaying the significance of that. And because of his failure to promptly act, over 50,000 people are dead today. And over 1 million people have been infected with this virus. The economy has been destroyed because of this virus. So this is a serious situation. A lot is at stake in this election. So these elections do matter, and I understand what people are saying when they talk about a lot being at stake. This man is openly, he has appointed white supremacists to positions of power. People like Stephen Bannon. So a lot is at stake. So I understand why people have anxiety around this election. I understand why some people would question Diddy's actions and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But there are also things that have to be said. I mean, too often, the Democratic Party has taken the black vote for granted. They have taken it completely for granted. And I'm going to get into that. I just want to see a couple of the comments before I go further. So Covina Man said, I never liked Diddy or his music. He thinks he has white privilege, but it's just money privilege. I hope he runs for president. Somebody else said, I hope he runs for president. Hold on one second. And this person said, We shouldn't have to apologize for wanting politicians to focus on us specifically because we've been in a hellhole of a situation too long. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, and that's the next point that I wanted to get to about the black agenda. And I'll go back to your comments. I'm just gonna make a few comments about what I think about this situation. So, the first thing that I pointed out is that this is a very serious situation. Donald Trump is not acting in a way that's beneficial to black people. He is openly hostile to the interests of black people. So this election really matters. So I understand the concern that people have about the possibility of Trump being reelected. I understand that fully. I get that. But I also want to stress the importance of a black agenda. And I'm glad that Diddy kind of started this conversation. I mean, even though many people have been talking about the need for a black agenda and all that kind of stuff, we definitely need to have a black agenda and we need to hold these politicians accountable. The problem that I have with the approach of people like Diddy, they actually expect these politicians to come to us with a black agenda. What should happen, when it comes to politics, is we should come to these politicians with our agenda and demand that they adhere to our agenda instead of expecting these politicians to come up and tell us what they're going to do for us. We need to be telling them what they need to do for us and tell them that if they don't support our agenda, then we don't support them. That's what we need to be about. And this is something that shouldn't have happened like after basically the primaries are just about wrapped up. All the opposition has withdrawn from the race, and Joe Biden is the front runner and the presumptive nominee for the Democratic nomination for president. So I mean, it's a late point right now to be talking about a black agenda. I mean, this is something that should have been put forth. I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of organizations and individuals that have been talking about this and putting forth a black agenda. But I agree with, other commentators, like some of the people that were on Roland Martin, that were talking about how really, this is really late in the game. And I think that Diddy should have uh, raised a lot of these issues a long time ago during the primaries. But I don't think it's not absolutely too late to be talking about a need for these candidates to adhere to a black agenda. But I just think that it's a late in the process, man. It would have been more effective to start earlier, pushing all of these candidates to support and adhere to a black agenda. That's something that should have happened a long time ago. But even though it's happening now, uh, we can still move forward on the black agenda now. I mean, the thing is, too often we don't um, have a black agenda. We don't hold these candidates accountable. We just vote Democrat without thinking about it. And that's a huge problem in our community. But we're in a dilemma. That's the situation. We're in a dilemma right now where we have a party that, we have the Republicans on one side that don't give a damn about black people at all. They don't need black votes to get elected. A lot of these Republicans are in predominantly white areas where they don't need black votes in order to get elected, so they don't care nothing about black people. And then on the other hand, we have a party that provides, they provide some policy positions that help African Americans, but in many incidents, they take the black vote for granted. They don't make us a priority, even though we prioritize them. We give the Democrats more support than any other group in the country. But it seems like, unfortunately, we don't receive that same kind of support from the Democratic Party to the same extent. Um, there are many situations where the black vote is taken for granted, where black voters are thrown under the bus in order to appease white moderate voters. And we've seen this time and time again. For instance, like I mean, one of the clear examples of this that comes to mind is is the situation involving Bill Clinton and how he attended this event with Jesse Jackson, and he used the opportunity to throw Sister Soldier under the bus and Jesse Jackson under the bus at the same time. Um, Basically, dissing black voters and black people. But since black people are in a position where we're so dependent on these Democrats, nobody held him accountable. And black people continued to vote for him and support him. They even went so far as to call this man the first black president. And then even if you look at Obama, and you know my position on Obama, he's done a lot of great things for black people. But even Obama, he uh, when pressed on to deal with black issues, him and his spokespeople basically said he was the president of all America, not black America. So he downplayed basically that's a way of saying, well, I'm not going to focus solely on your issues or concentrate on your issues um, and all that kind of stuff. So even President Obama, to some degree, downplayed uh, black people, by saying, well, hey, I'm not the president of black people, I'm president of all people and all that kind of stuff. Um, so, I mean, this issue is important. I mean, and then on the question of reparations, you know, not a single one of the mainstream candidates openly supported reparations. None of the mainstream presidential candidates supported reparations. Not even liberal Bernie Sanders. I think that later on, towards the end of his campaign, this time he expressed some views that were in favor of HR 40, from what I understand. But he was very reluctant to move in that direction, to move in the direction of supporting reparations. And I haven't heard Joe Biden say anything about reparations at all. Um, so even though black people give the Democratic Party virtually almost 100% support, well over 90% support, that party in many ways doesn't fully support black people and the interests of black people. Now, when you compare the Democrats to the Republicans, there's no comparison. The Democrats support our issues way more than the Republicans do, obviously, and because of that, we're in a dilemma where we're forced to, you know, decide between the lesser of two evils. We're forced to decide, well, hey, at least these Democrats are doing something for black people, so I'm going to go with voting for Democrats and stuff like that instead of these Republicans. So it's a dilemma. And it's a dilemma that doesn't give black people leverage to get all of the things that we need in order to thrive and to be successful as a group of people. Um, and it's just an unfortunate situation. But I believe that it's time for the black community to put forth, and there are plenty of groups that have done this. I'm not going to say it hasn't been done, but we need to be more forceful in our demands to this Democratic Party. And, if anything, this talk that Diddy has made about this issue is significant because it's starting it's helping to reignite this conversation about accountability in politics and all that kind of stuff. And I'll get to your comments in a second. Um, so I think that it's important, because we just vote. A lot of times we vote Democrat without thinking. We make very little demands on these politicians. And then, we want to complain about them not doing enough. And I just think that that's a tired cycle. It's a tired situation when we're constantly forced to settle for mediocrity. And make no mistake about it, Joe Biden represents mediocrity. He's not some fierce advocate for African American people. And I'm going to explain to you why. I mean, first of all, this man bragged about um, how he was able to work with these segregationists. And he bragged about this like during this election cycle, he bragged about how he was able to work with segregationists, as if that's a good thing. The same segregationists that supported policies that made black people second class citizens, the same segregationists that view black people as inferior, that view black people as stupid. They thought it was okay for black people to sit at the back of the bus, okay for black people to be segregated, to go to places that say no colors, and no dogs allowed. Those are the kinds of people this man bragged about working with. The people that didn't want to give black people the right to vote, that were opposed to us having the right to vote. These are the kinds of people that Joe Biden bragged about working for, working with. So he represents mediocrity at best when it comes to the interests of black people. This is a man who opposed busing for African Americans, opposed it. A policy designed to give African Americans opportunities to go to better schools, schools that had better facilities and better capabilities and, better resources. He opposed busing. He openly opposed it. But this is the man that all these Negroes are bending over backwards to support. Bending over backwards to support this guy. This man has a problematic history when it comes to black people. This is a man who supported the crime bill. Not only did he vote for the crime bill, but he was one of these people out here campaigning hard for it. Going all the way out for it. And we know that crime bill has helped perpetuate the problem of mass incarceration of black people, nonviolent drug offenders, mass incarcerated because of that crime bill, as well documented in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. So this man is a mediocre candidate at best when it comes to the interests of black people. And also, as I pointed out in one of my prior videos on Joe Biden, this man has a history of lying about his involvement in the civil rights movement. When our people fought and died for civil rights, our people fought and died, went to jail for civil rights, were beaten fighting for civil rights, were killed fighting for civil rights. You have this man lying about marching with King, lying about the level of his involvement in the civil rights movement. But yet and still, you got all these black people that are unconditionally supporting this guy. Supporting him without question. Bending over backwards to support him. So, this is a problematic situation, man. He does not represent he doesn't represent a person that's been dedicated to our interests. He doesn't have a track record of fighting for black people or fighting and advocating on behalf of black people or promoting a black agenda. When you look at these very serious problems that I pointed out in his track record. So under those circumstances, it's more than appropriate for somebody like Diddy to ask, what are you going to do for the black community? Every single person in the black community needs to be asking themselves that question during every single election. Whether we're talking about the presidential election, the Senate election, Congress election, your state representative, or your city councilman, we need to be asking, what are you going to do to improve the lives of black people? Especially when somebody has a track record, a problematic track record such as Joe Biden. Now, I'm not going to say that this man hasn't done anything for civil rights. I'm not going to say that at all. But what I'm saying is that these issues that I raise raise serious questions about his commitment to the black community. And it's more than appropriate for us to be asking, what are you going to do for the black community? Not who you're going to appoint in certain positions, not just about who you're going to nominate for your vice president and all that kind of stuff, or who you're going to put in some token position, but what are your policy positions to deal with the economic gap between the wealth gap between black and white citizens? What is your proposal to deal with police brutality and racial profiling? What is your strategy to deal with those issues? What is your strategy to deal with the health care disparities that exist in the black community? What's your strategy for that? Those are the kind of questions that we need to be putting forth to these candidates. And even, like I said before, even better than that, we need to put forth our agenda and say, what is your level of commitment to these issues that we have outlined? What is your level of commitment to the question of reparations for black communities? And we should leverage our power. A Democratic presidential candidate cannot be elected without the black vote. Without all of that support that people like Joe Biden receive from the black community, they can't be elected. Joe Biden would not have, he hasn't officially won yet, but for all intents and purposes, he's won the Democratic nomination. If it wasn't for black voters in the South, there's no way that this guy would have won the Democratic nomination. So the question has to be, what are we getting in return for that vote? What are the black voters from the South that made it possible for this man to get elected? What are they receiving in return for that vote? And that's a very real question. That's a legitimate question to raise. And I'm glad that Diddy has helped reignite this conversation about what are black people getting in exchange for their vote for Joe Biden. We had the power to leverage this. We definitely had the power to do so. And I understand there's a lot at stake. And I'm not going to talk about who I'm voting for just yet, but I'm a practical and reasonable person. I know about the risk of having a Donald Trump back in the White House, and I want to do everything that I can to prevent that from happening. But we need to hold these candidates accountable. We need to hold Joe Biden and the Democratic Party accountable. And we need to get measurable points from them. They need to present us with some kind of proposal, or make their position clear on the issues that matter to us. And they need to tell us in measurable terms, in tangible terms, what they plan to do to benefit black communities. Just like they do to these other groups. When they're dealing with the pro-Israeli lobby, they tell them what they're going to do for them. They adhere to their agenda. When they're dealing with the LGBT community, they tell them what they're going to do to promote the interests of the LGBT. Or when they're dealing with the immigrant community, they tell them exactly what they're going to produce for them. And it's time that we, just like any other group, any other interest group, put our interests up front and demand that these politicians adhere to our interests. So that's very important. The next point I want to talk about is just Diddy and his influence. Diddy talked about holding the vote hostage. Even though Diddy has influence as as an entertainer, a lot of people follow him on social media. He does have the influence of a lot of people, but he doesn't speak for all black America. And he's not in any kind of position at all to hold the black vote hostage at all. He's not in any position to say well, I'm going to make sure that black people don't vote for you, and black people actually listen to, you know, most black people actually listen to him and actually do that. That's not a likely scenario. So he's not in any real position to hold the black vote hostage or anything like that. Um, so that's one thing that just has to be pointed out about what he had to say. Um, you know, and it's important to note this, again, this is a dilemma, that we're struggling with. But it's like if you decide not to vote, I think that all that amounts to is a vote for Donald Trump. For me, that is not an option in this election. I don't believe that we should sit this election out. You know, our ancestors and our elders fought and died for our right to vote. The last thing that we need to do is sit this election out. Instead, we need to be pushing hard to make sure that these candidates adhere to our agenda and provide us with meaningful and measurable promises to address the concerns of our community. And then not only promises, we need real action to be taken. So those are some of my thoughts about this situation. And just to summarize, I'll just say this, there's a lot at stake in this election. I don't think that we had a luxury of sitting it out. I do believe that Donald Trump poses a threat to the interests of black people. But at the same time, I don't think that we should just surrender our vote without making any demands of Joe Biden or the Democrats. We need to leverage our position and make sure that these candidates and parties adhere to our agenda just like any other group does. Um, yeah, so let me see what you all are saying before I close out. I want to thank people for tuning in. I'm going to go back through your comments real quick. You got to excuse me. I have a hard time seeing this fine print. So someone said, if we were brought here as slaves and still here, it means we're in captivity. What slave master will give their slaves an opportunity to supersede them? None. Without war, there will be no freedom. Um, it's not about superseding anybody. Um, that's not what it's about. It's about ensuring that African Americans have full opportunities to thrive and to be prosperous in this country. And just like any other group, we have the right and the power to leverage our interests to make sure that these politicians are held accountable and make sure that they implement policies that benefit us. Um, so that's what it's about. And I understand, obviously, I know that we came here under, atrocious circumstances, the legacy of slavery and all that kind of stuff. But we're not slaves today. We had a power um, to influence these politicians if we exercise that power. Somebody like Diddy, who has millions of dollars. I'm not sure if he's a billionaire, but he makes hundreds of millions of dollars. He has the power to have influence, to make a difference in this election, by putting his money behind progressive candidates that are fighting for the interests of black people. We need to move away from this helplessness type of mentality that some of us have, like where we think that there's nothing that we can do to change our situation. Somebody like Diddy has the power to have a conversation with a Joe Biden, has the power to talk to Joe Biden about what issues are important to him and what he wants to see Joe Biden do. And then he has the power to put his money behind those particular policies and stuff that he wants to see implemented. So, so yeah, I mean, in terms of war, like I don't think that war is the solution to our problem. I just think that that's just fantasy talk. That's just something that people say online. You know, um, and I won't even go any further. Uh, than that to just say that that's just rhetoric. We need to use all means that are available to us. Every single means that is available to us to make a difference in our lives. And rhetoric of war doesn't will not improve our plight at all. That's just something somebody's typing on YouTube. That's not something that's going to actually make a difference in people's lives. Um, so let me go back through your comments, and thanks to people for tuning in. Um, this is going to be a long video probably. All right, let me. Yeah, so somebody said that the only person that can save us from oppression is the Most High. Um, and I understand that. I'm a person of faith. I believe, without God, nothing is possible. Nothing would happen. I understand the need of faith, and the role of God in our lives and in our struggle. Like without the intervention of God, we would not have been able to emerge from being slaves to becoming leaders of industry and uh, president and senators and governors and all that kind of stuff and mayors and all that kind of stuff. I believe that that is a result of blessings from God. But at the same time, we can't sit on our laurels and just chill waiting for some miracle to happen. God works through men, through human beings. And if we want to see our condition improve, we can't just sit around waiting for something to happen, waiting for a miracle. We need to be engaged in struggle in all different forms. We also need to be engaged in the political process as well if we want to see a difference in our lives. Um, this idea of just sitting around waiting for things to happen and praying alone is not the answer. I believe in the power of prayer, but I also believe that prayers are fulfilled in part because of things that people do to make prayers become manifest. Um, so that's what I have to say about that comment. So just bear with me a second. Somebody going by the name of Random User said, I think we need an organized front and push the Democratic Party to be more progressive. Too many politicians focus on the interests of rich people mainly. And I think that that's a valid point. We definitely do need to be more organized and have a united front. So I support that. I agree with you on that. A lot of these candidates are mainly dependent on rich people, and rich people define the agenda because they're the ones giving all the money to these candidates to run for office. So that's a valid point. So Covina Man said black people have been very focused during this campaign season. Biden's campaign was dying until black people were allowed to vote. Black people resurrected Joe Biden. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like the South, when he won South Carolina and he won those other southern states, that did help resurrect his campaign. And he won in large part due to the black vote. The black vote made a difference. The black vote was critical. And for that reason, black people need to be a priority in that man's agenda. And we need to do everything in our power to make black people at the forefront of that agenda. And, again, this is a difficult situation, you know, but I'm not going to allow Donald Trump to win. I have to do everything that I can to prevent Donald Trump from winning. But at the same time, we need to push Joe Biden to address our issues. So let's see what folks are saying. Just bear with me a second. So Yvette Lee said, "When will we wake up, Black people? We are consumers. We are the working class. If we buy nothing and don't put our money back in the corporations, we have big leverage to put in our demands." Yeah, it is. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. That's a good point. So, Yvette Lee said, yeah, when regular people speak on it, no one listens, but it takes a rich man who screw his own record label people out of money to speak on it for people to get woke. And I think that that's a valid point because a lot of people on his label complain about getting, taken for their money and getting screwed around and all that kind of stuff. And this is some rich person, somebody making millions upon millions of dollars, whose whole situation can't even be compared at all to the average black person situation. And I wonder how much he can really relate to the average black person's plight, how much of an advocate he can really be in such a privileged type of position. So you make some great points. And you've had people talking about the need for a black agenda for a very long time, all over YouTube, everywhere. And you have organizations that actually put forth a black agenda and do the work. They actually put together candidates' questionnaires, and they rate and grade the legislative record of candidates and stuff like that based on their adherence to an agenda. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of groups that are putting in the work, but because of fame, like we are a population that's so obsessed with celebrity and fame and wealth. Because of that, somebody like a Diddy will receive far more attention than some grassroots group speaking on the same type of issues. And then you have this person talking about how we're not citizens. And basically, they're talking about the electoral college, and we have the right to vote. No, they actually said we don't have a right to vote. We have a voters act, and in all actuality, we're not considered citizens. I mean, when I hear this kind of stuff, it just reminds me of just how misinformed people are because the Voter Rights Act protects our right to vote. We do have the right to vote in this country. That protects our right to vote. You have the Constitution that gives us a right to vote in this country. So, that's just outright wrong. And then, with respect to the Electoral College, I understand why a lot of people raise this issue because we don't directly elect the president. The president is elected by the electors who are on the Electoral College, but the electors vote in accordance with the popular vote of the districts or the states that they represent. Very rare do they vote contrary to the popular vote within the particular state that they're supposed to represent and vote on behalf of. And I mean, if I'm wrong, prove that I'm wrong. Provide some evidence of a situation where the particular state voted one way, and the elector voted contrary to the way that the state voted. And you have some like small exceptions, but for the most part, the electors vote in accordance with the state that they represent and all that kind of stuff. So our votes do matter. We do have an impact on the election. I believe that we should get rid of the electoral college because it is a barrier between the people directly electing the official. Um, it's unnecessary. We should get rid of it, but let's not pretend like our vote has no meaning. That's what you get. Like I just don't. I just reject that idea. And we are citizens in this country, despite this rhetoric that this person put up here. We are citizens in this country. Um, the um, the Constitution made us citizens in this country. Um, it talks about naturalized citizens. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship rights and, equal protection under the law and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that that's just a false argument. I mean, a lot of that is put out here by these people that adhere to certain ideologies, instead of like actually looking at the actual laws and the actual facts. I mean, there's a particular term for it, but the name of it escapes me right now. So let me just go back to these comments. So somebody said that Donald Trump may get the vote because of that stimulus check. That's what they basically suggested, and that'd be a shame, if people vote for this man just because he gave them $1,200, which is really nothing in the big scheme of things. When you think about all the people that have lost their jobs um, because of this situation, that's nothing. When you look at all the people that can't pay their rent or can't pay for various expenses, that's a very small amount of money. It's something, but it's not nearly enough to address the impact of this coronavirus. Okay, so let's see. So Renaissance Man said black folks have no one to blame but ourselves. Bernie's platform would have benefited black people disproportionately, but everybody wanted Biden because of his ties to Obama. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a valid point. And I agree. Like, you know, when you look at Bernie's agenda, it was an agenda that dealt with a lot of the issues that are pertinent to African Americans. Um, and when you look at his track record when it comes to our issues, there's no comparison between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. But a lot of people um, ended up voting for Joe Biden. A lot of people had these sentimental reasons for voting for him or practical reasons. Like, people thought that he would be the better person to go against Donald Trump. And we'll see what happens during this election. I mean, many people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the best person to go against Donald Trump. And we see how that turned out. So yeah, I think that that's a valid point. I already talked about the problematic areas dealing with Joe Biden when it comes to the interests of black people. Um, and just because somebody served as President Obama's vice president, that doesn't mean that they're going to be acting in the interests of black people. When Obama selected Joe Biden to be the vice president, he did it out of practical concerns. He had to win over white voters. He had to convince them that he wasn't going to destroy the country or he wasn't going to be a radical or something like that. So he had to bring on somebody like Joe Biden to win over those voters. So just because Joe Biden worked with Obama, that doesn't mean that he's going to do something for black people necessarily. So I think that that's a great point that you raised. Yeah, so Renaissance King Ace 25 said, I want to vote for a third party in the U.S. I'm voting Green Party. I refuse to vote Republican. And Joe is a no for me. The Green Party does offer some good things. And I think I mean, there's something to that. You know, I hear what you're saying about Joe Biden. And to some extent, I agree with you. But it's just like with this election, there's so much at stake. And we know that a Green Party candidate is probably not going to become president of the United States. So we have to carefully consider that. And I feel what you're saying because during the last election, you know, the last presidential election, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I just couldn't vote for her. I voted for the third party candidate, the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein. Uh, but when I did so, I did so knowing the circumstances of the situation. I live in Maryland. You know, this is an overwhelmingly Democratic state. You know, I knew that by voting for a Green Party candidate, my vote would not tip the scales in favor of Donald Trump in this state. You know, my vote was more of a protest vote. It was a protest against, you know, a lot of the things that Hillary Clinton stood for that were detrimental to black people, like welfare reform, you know, like the crime bill, you know, and other things. So I had to, you know, I couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton in good conscience. And I went for the Green Party candidate. So I feel what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. But I think that people need to be strategic if they're going to vote third party. You need to, first of all, understand that a third party candidate is probably not going to win. And if you are going to vote for a Green Party candidate, I would make sure that you do so in a calculated way. Only do that in a place where you know you're not going to tip the scales in favor of Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, without a doubt, is a disaster for the black community. He is openly hostile to the black community's interests. So let me see if I can find out where I was before. So Covina Man said the hip hop community is the worst on politics. You know, people such as David Banner, Killer Mike, Diddy, Kanye West, they're all garbage. They don't represent the black vote, but the gangster rap vote. Now, I will say this, man. I mean, one of my concerns about this Diddy's comments, like, I really wonder, you know, even though he makes some legitimate points, as I discussed before, I just wonder, like, if he's not being used by people like Trump to make sure that Trump gets another 4 years, man. That's one of my deepest concerns, man. You know, him being manipulated in such a way that it results in black people saying, well, I'm not going to vote. I'm going to stay at home. Especially right now where, you know, because of this virus, people are at home. You know, a lot of times in most jurisdictions, people are voting by mail. So I'm just concerned about the voter turnout under those circumstances. Um, I really am. And I think that something like this kind of rhetoric may suppress voter turnout or lower voter turnout. And that's one of my concerns, man. Like, um, and you know, I would think, I would hope that Diddy hasn't been in direct communication with somebody like Donald Trump and they're encouraging this kind of foolishness or, you know, in contact with Donald Trump's surrogates to encourage this kind of foolishness where black people don't actually come out and vote. So that's my biggest concern. And it's like, I mean, if he's so, I just want to find out, like, what is Diddy's track record when it comes to being an advocate for a black agenda? I mean, other than this statement that he made recently, what is his track record in terms of pushing for a black agenda. Now I know that he has like businesses and all that kind of stuff, and that's a great thing. He has the Revolt TV, and they've had these discussions about black issues and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to know, like, what is his track record in pushing that black agenda on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level? What is his track record? So let's see. Yeah, this is going a little bit longer than I expected. Let me go through these comments. Yeah, shout out to Psycho. Thanks for tuning in, Psychopatheus. He said, "I agree with you on about Biden, and these black Trump supporters are on my last nerves." Yeah. So King Ace 25 said that the Green Party gets over 5% of the general vote in November, they get federal funding similar to Dems and Republicans. If they get the funding, then they can grow. Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that. Like, I feel what you're saying. Like, I am sympathetic to this idea of supporting Green Party candidates and stuff. As I said before, I have voted for Greens before. So this person, I'm not going to mispronounce your name, but this person is saying we are slaves today without chains. How are we? How aren't we slaves? And they said it starts with us and not them. They are not obligated to help us. Um, so let me just respond to that. I mean, we're not slaves. I mean, to call ourselves slaves is first of all like it's diminishing the suffering of our ancestors who were actually slaves. We're not slaves. You know, we have certain freedoms and all that kind of stuff, obviously. Nobody has us in chains and nobody's literally beating our backs and all that kind of stuff and outright raping our women and stuff like that. So, I mean, I just think that it's an exaggeration to say that we are slaves today. In some ways, you could say, well, hey, we suffer from mental slavery and all that kind of stuff. Like, we deal with inferiority complex because of years of white supremacist indoctrination. You could say that we're not financially independent. You could say those types of things, but to say that we're slaves, I think that that's an exaggeration and it downplays the suffering of our ancestors. Um, all right, so let's see. Just reading through your comments now. Yeah, it is sad, Psycho, that that Joe Biden's mere connection to Obama got the won him the black vote. Man, that's a shame. Um, and it's like with age, man, our eyesight is getting bad. Sorry, y'all. Let's see. And T Boy says that as far as Diddy goes, his issue with him was that he was blocking Kenny Burns on Instagram for challenging his statements. Um, Yeah, so Hillbilly said black people should move to Florida, Georgia, Alabama until the entire population is black. At that point, black people get 3 states worth of votes. That's huge. So somebody asked, did our vote ever count? And yes, it has counted. And I've done videos on voting issues before, like why we should vote, and videos opposing those people who say we shouldn't vote. So I'm not going to reiterate the points that I made there. Instead, I may just post a link in the cards to one of the videos that I've done addressing that issue. But yeah, our vote has counted. And when you say, has any politician ever helped black people? Um, Let me see what your exact. Yeah, I guess you said has any presidential. It has any president ever helped black people? I mean, there are plenty of examples. I mean, if you look at uh, even somebody like Lyndon B. Johnson, somebody that's made racist statements before, somebody like him, he passed civil rights legislation, historic civil rights legislation that gives us certain rights that we take for granted today. If you look at even somebody like Barack Obama, he's done many things that help black people. Um, and I've done prior videos on what Obama has done to help black people. I encourage you to check those out. But some of those things include the Fair Sentencing Act, defending affirmative action, defending voting rights, uh, investigating all these police brutality situations, uh, reaching settlement agreements with police departments such as the Baltimore City Police Department after the Freddie Gray situation, reaching agreements with the Ferguson police and other jurisdictions. So those are some things. I have a whole laundry list on another video that I did. Also, you look at the Brothers Keeper program that Obama implemented during his term. So there are many things that many politicians have done, like all the civil rights legislation that we have on the federal level and on the state level were enacted by politicians. So, this notion that politicians and presidents in particular haven't done anything for black people is just preposterous. It's just outright false. Have they done enough for black people? Obviously not. Obviously, there's more that they can do for black people and that they should do for black people. Um, so let me continue going on through your comments. Well, thanks for leaving your comments. I don't want to mispronounce your name, so I'm not going to pronounce it. But I want to thank you for tuning in, even though we disagreed on some points. Shout out to Def Rocker. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, somebody mentioned. Okay. Yeah, so shout out to everybody for tuning in. I truly appreciate y'all tuning in. Um, Again, I'm encouraging everyone to subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. Like the video, share the video, um, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Um, so, with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. And lastly, I want to encourage everyone to support my political campaign. In a few minutes, I'm going to post a video where I'm calling on people to donate to my campaign. Check out that video. Also, I'll post a link in the comments to this video so that people can donate to the campaign. Peace and blessings, everyone. Be safe and have a great